Welcome to Off the Grid, where we talk about all things renewable energy and sustainability. In today's episode, we have a special guest, Warwick, here to talk about the renewable space in Africa. So Warwick, why is renewable energy in Africa so important to you?
Thanks for having me on, Maya. I was born and raised in Zambia and spent my school years in South Africa, where electricity, or more so the lack of it, was always quite a big concern. Mostly just due to the severe power outages we saw growing up, but they're a lot more prevalent in South Africa at the moment, where they experience major power outages almost on a daily basis, which is what's now called load shedding. Basically just scheduled power outages across the country to make sure that they don't see an entire grid failure when the system can't meet the demand.
And is renewable energy already playing a major role in Africa?
So, as you can imagine, renewables are at a much earlier stage in Africa than they are in most developed economies, but they are making huge strides towards being a more dominant source of electricity generation. In Zambia and Zimbabwe specifically, we see hydroelectricity as one of the most dominant sources of electricity across both countries, and it's largely due to the Kariba Dam. So, Kariba is the largest man-made dam in the world, and the hydropower plants there actually provide over 2 gigawatts of power towards both countries. So in Zambia alone, that power from Kariba pretty much makes up around 70% of their total consumption.
That's interesting. So what point is Africa at in terms of renewable energy use?
So contrary to popular belief, Africa is quite a lot more competitive than most people would believe in the renewable space. At the moment, across the continent, around 22 countries use renewables as their primary source of electricity. So on average, it just means that African countries use renewables for around 40% of their total electricity generation, which is actually higher than the UK, the US, and Japan. So just with that, Kenya's probably the most interesting case in the renewable space at the moment, just because 80% of their electricity generation is already made up of renewable energies. And they're already making huge strides towards achieving net zero. In fact, they've made a pledge to achieve that by 2030, which is an almost impossible case for most countries as it stands.
Okay, and what does the future of renewable energy look like for Africa?
Naturally, the renewable space in Africa is largely solar-centric, just due to the weather conditions that we find there. But they're probably quite a bit further behind than most in the efforts towards net zero, just because they also started a little bit later than most as well. But according to the International Renewable Energies Agency, they're set to grow their renewable capacity from 59 gigawatts currently to a total of around 530 gigawatts by 2040. All in all, it puts Africa right at the forefront of this new renewables frontier. And I truly believe that in the coming years, we are going to be looking at Africa as one of the most promising markets in the renewable space.
Thanks for joining us, Warwick. We look forward to seeing you all in our next episode of Off the Grid.